Hello, everyone. Our lesson for today is about the principles of signal transduction. This lesson provides an overview of the general process of cell communication. It will specifically discuss the roles of signal molecules, cell surface receptors, and second messengers. This lesson will also tackle the different modes of cell signaling and the different types of cell to cell interactions. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the basic principle of signal transduction, describe the different modes of cell signaling, and describe the different types of cell to cell interactions. Now, how do the cells of living organisms communicate? So that is the question. So you ask humans of different ways on how we actually communicate and elicit a response. Say, for example, for couples, even without saying any word, no, the when you give someone flowers, that is already sending, a message to someone, and with that, message that is carried by the flowers, a specific response, has been shown here. No? So in cell communication, the same thing, of course. There is someone, that is sending the message. So it could be a cell, no? One cell that is sending a message through the flowers, and the cell that receives the messages or the message and is the one that elicits a specific response. This time, the girl was happy, upon receiving the flower. So again, the question is, how do the cells of living organisms communicate? So cells of multicellular organisms, they must communicate in order to organize themselves into complex structures. So that they will be able to from single cells, when they form a tissue and eventually form different organ systems, there needs to be no specific communication among them, so that no, the different processes will go smoothly and there will be no impairment of the, say for example, in the growth of a particular organisms. Now, so when cells communicate, what are needed so that the cells can communicate? So there needs to be a signaling molecule, not the one that is sent, by the cell that sends the signal. So the message will be carried through these signaling molecules, or this is what we call, or these molecules are what we call the ligands. Okay, and then someone from the target cell must receive the message or the ligands, and these are the jobs of the receptors. Okay, and in order to relay the specific response, the second messengers acts, as the relay molecules in order to elicit this response. So say for example, in this is the basic, structure of how cell communication, of course. So a ligand is released by one cell to signal the target cell. Now that ligand or signaling molecule is received by a receptor. Then, upon binding of the ligand and the receptor, that triggers, the release of this second messenger to elicit a specific, or to do a specific response in a particular cell. So this is a three-step process. So there is signal perception. It is when the receptor proteins binds, to the ligand, or is bounded by a ligand. Then intracellular signal transduction. The signal is now transduced, okay, upon the receipt of the message, and then a specific cellular response is made by the cell. Signaling molecules. Actually, this is signaling molecules, in the most acceptable spelling is single L. So cell communication or signal transduction is mediated mainly by extracellular signal molecules. So these extracellular signal molecules, are what we call the ligands. These ligands, they vary in size, shape, and structure, some of which operate over long distances, while others signal only to neighboring cells. Receptors, on the other hand, are found mostly in cells of multicellular organisms. They both, are the ones that emit, so they could release signals. At the same time, they could also receive signals. So the reception of the signals depends on the receptor proteins, usually, but not always. Found at cell surface or in any other membrane surfaces that binds the signal molecule. So you have here the uh, receptor. So receptors, the binding of the signal molecule will now activate the signal or the cell surface receptor, which in turn activates one or more intracellular signaling pathways. So the relay chains of molecule process the signal inside the receiving cell and distribute it to the appropriate intracellular targets. These targets are generally effector proteins, which are altered when the signaling pathway is activated and implements the appropriate change of cell behavior. So, what could be the possible cell responses? So, possible cell responses include cellular differentiation, proliferation. Now, proliferation is more on the cell division, survival, or other cell specific responses. Now, what are the different modes of cell signaling? Okay, so there are five possible modes of cell signaling. Again, we will be using the single L ng spelling. This is involved, there are five possible modes of cell signaling involved in signal transduction. First, intacrine signaling, autocrine signaling, juxtacrine signaling, paracrine signaling, and endocrine signaling. Intacrine signaling happens when a signaling molecule or a ligand is acting inside a cell. So at this time, the receptor proteins are not found in cell surface membrane, but are inside. So the example of this are those ligand that acts through a nuclear receptor. Okay, that's intacrine signaling molecule or a ligand that is acting already inside the cell. It is not released outside. Autocrine signaling, on the other hand, takes place when the signal is directed to the same cell. So the same cell is releasing the signal, but the same cell is also releasing the signal. More or less the same, but in here, the ligands are released outside the cell. So the signal binds with the cell surface receptor and not a nuclear receptor, unlike intacrine signaling. Juxtacrine signaling, on the other hand, is also known as contact dependent signaling. So there it should be contact of one receptor emitting a ligand and another receptor of another cell that is accepting the ligand. So there is direct cell to cell signaling. So the proximity between cells is mandatory for signaling to take place. That is a case of juxtacrine signaling. Paracrine signaling, on the other hand, needs a cell to cell interaction. So signals are produced for adjacent cells. Okay, so they are not really, the cells are not in direct contact because the signaling molecule, the ligand, is released by the cell. In here, the signaling molecule or the ligand is not released by the donors or the cell that is um, producing the ligand. In here, the ligand is released by one cell and is received through this receptor by the adjacent, ito mga katapad rapod nga cells. Endocrine signaling and are the ones that uses hormones as signaling molecules. So this is for signals that needs to travel over long distances. The signals that are carried by the bloodstream and are those that reach the target cell with receptors. So say for example, the signals that are released by the brain. No, when our brain tells our, say for example, our reproductive system to make more uh, testosterone, or to make more follicle stimulating hormone, or to make more uh, or to make more uh, hormones for the growth of the organism. So that is through endocrine signaling. So from the brain to other parts of the body, that is a long distance, and the signal needs to travel, via the bloodstream. So those are the different modes of cell signaling. Now, intracrine, autocrine, juxtacrine, paracrine, and uh, endocrine. And yeah, endocrine, paracrine. Okay, so those are different modes of cell signaling. Now let us talk about the types of cell-to-cell interaction. So there are three types of cell-to-cell interactions based on function. So there are what we call tight junctions, anchoring junctions, and communicating junctions. Tight junctions are also called occluding junctions. So they connect, no, the plasma membranes of adjacent cells. Itong katapat ng cell, you have here the junctions that connects the plasma membrane. So they prevent leakage of small molecules from between these cells. Okay, so that is what we call tight junctions. Anchoring junctions, on the other hand, are mechanically attached to the cytoskeleton of the cell. So they are usually found in the cells that make up the muscles and skin epithelium and can withstand some mechanical stress. Okay, so this is the junction. Okay, so they connect these two cells, and they are mechanically attached to the cytoskeleton. So they are usually found in cells that make up, yes, no, that make up the muscles and skin epithelium. Desmosomes are those anchoring junctions that connect cytoskeletons of adjacent cells. So this is what we call desmosomes. Hemidesmosomes, on the other hand, are those that anchor epithelial cells to the basement membrane. So if this is the basement membrane, so the one that anchors these cells to that membrane are what we call the hemidesmosomes. Now, forming these links in the junction, okay, are proteins called cadherins. Okay, adherence junction is one type of anchoring junction that connects the actin filaments of one cell with those of neighboring cells or with extracellular matrix. It is mediated by a protein called integrin. So be sure to remember, the terms. Desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, how are they different from each other? And adherence and integrin, just the difference between their function. Communicating junctions, on the other hand, no, have is involved in the direct physical contact, no, that is established that allows small molecules to pass. So more or less, halos may sila with tight junctions. These are also called gap junctions, and they're composed of structures called connexons. So these are complex of six identical transmembrane proteins that allow passage of larger molecules like sugar and amino acids. Okay, so those are the topics, no, the different things that you need to learn, no, in this lesson. So if you want to be effective in reviewing the key concept that we have learned, now you should be able to answer these summary questions. What are the key components for successful cell communication, and how do they function? What are the possible modes of cell signaling involved in signal transduction, and how do they differ? What are the types of cell-to-cell interactions, and what are their specific roles? So I hope you will be able to answer that one as you go about the lessons that we have discussed today. Okay? So if you have any questions, you can contact me or any of your lecturer, for clarification. You can send emails, or you can also directly key in your questions through the Facebook group messenger. So before I end, allow me to thank Mr. Aaron Oliver Cibalondo for the help in making the slide presentation. So thank you very much and see you again in our next lesson.